I've only gone and got myself the JBL Boombox 2.
That's not the Boombox 2, that's the Solar Snow Boom Boom.
Hang on a sec. Got myself JBL Boombox 2. Couple of years late, got there in the end. Story of me life. The biggest question in my mind has been on my mind. My world, pound for pound world champion, the Soundcore Motion Boom. We know it's great value, about 80 quid for one. Can you guess the price of the JBL Boombox 2? Well, at least we know it's not a JBL extremely priced 3, but hang on a second, it's a boom, boom, boom price. $499, 450 quid. Wow, they're asking a lot of dosh. The question was, I could get 2 motion booms, can you? I can, yes, I'm allowed to. For about 160 quid each. No, about 160 pound for 2 of them. A third of the price of a single JBL Boombox 2. How close can they get was the question. And then one of my subscribers went and did the video. The Ascended Tech Ninja, or something like that. He's done the video. You can check out his video. I know the conclusions he came to, but still, in my head, I still had my questions. I wanted to see it in black and white. I wanted to do a couple of measurements. I wanted to know how they compare. And of course, if we're going to do any video with the JBL Boombox 2, the question you're going to say, yeah, but what does it sound like against the JBL extremely priced 3? You probably already know the headline specs. Well, we'll get to it again in the end if you really want to know. But what you really want to know is, first of all, of course, I want to know a quick frequency response measurement.
Frequency response Boombox 2. You can see it's going to have deep bass. The peak is around 50 hertz before it even rolls off. This is going to be a bass heavy. You can see the overall slant is on the bass side and then we're slanting down. You will note the clear dip, 2.5 kilohertz. Is that crossover related? We will see when we get to real world measurements. But while low mids and bass looks quite smooth, while on the bass heavy side, upper mids and the highs, notable peaks and dips. And the takeaway here is 80% we're limiting bass. By the time you hit maximum volume, it's keeping its bass peak. It's doing it at the cost of the upper bass.
So we know it limit, no surprise there, it limits at 80%. You'll get no more bass and then it'll get screechier, screechier, screechier. But the surprise to me was it tries to keep some actual deep bass, because this speaker's obviously all about deep bass. Wow, did you ever not know that? But it's doing it at the cost of upper bass. So not quite as bad as normal. It's not limiting all the bass, but it's limiting the upper bass. And that was a little bit of a surprise to me. You will notice that was the mains lead plugged in. The question is, because you get this all the time, I want to stick the mains lead, not just a JBL, but a lot of speakers that go louder when you stick the mains lead in. And then you get, wow, there's so much more bass. No, it's not more bass, it's just going louder. And then let's just check if I'm right this time. Mains, listen to it playing mains power and battery power.
I'm falling in love with you. I'm falling in love with you. I feel like, 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 I feel like I'm falling in love. I feel like, I feel like I'm falling in love with you. I feel like I'm falling in love with you.
So switching from battery power to mains power, we're getting about a decibel more. So not massively louder, but a bit louder. And the thing to note here is frequency response does not change. If we overlay them, they are identical. So stick the mains lead in, you're not getting more bass, but it's going a bit louder. In terms of what is that frequency response, if we compare to the original track, of course, we know it's bass heavy, more bass even than that original track. It's approaching 40 hertz before it even starts rolling off. But we can see that 2.5 kilohertz dip remains in the real world. But we've got wavy resonance going on all the way along till we hit harmonics past 6 kilohertz.
So it's not much louder. It's 1 decibel louder, but it is indeed louder. obviously a lot of the power is going to that big old bass. So we don't expect it to go that much louder. It's just driving more bass. That's going to sap a lot of the amp. It is identical. So we can put that to the side. It goes louder, but the actual frequency response, it's absolutely identical between battery and mains. And the other thing was, you'll notice, as I already mentioned, so there's this big old dip. I don't know if it's specific to my Boombox 2. Did you know JBL have 6 million versions of each speaker? I have the ND version of the Boombox 2, and it's camouflage. It's really hard to find. I'll put it down, and I can never find it. Ha ha ha. Anyway, so I've got the ND version. I don't know how that compares to other versions, but I can tell you of the few measurements out there that I've compared my measurements to, I don't see that 2.5 kilohertz drop. But it is real. It is there. It's not quite as dramatic as it looks in the frequency response when it comes to the real world. But it's very wavy. It's full of resonances, but it does have a big old bass. What does it sound like then compared to the actual original track? How accurate is this Boombox? Not that we're expecting it to be that accurate.
I'm falling in love with you. I'm falling in love with you. I feel like, 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 I feel like I'm falling in love. I feel like, I feel like I'm falling in love with you. I feel like I'm falling in love with you.
So obviously already, it's got a very, very boosted bass, and that's going to smother details, clarity anyway, even if the rest of it was a smooth frequency response. But it's far from that. It's far more wavy, I will say, than I ever expected. And it's right in that presence, the 4 to 6 kilohertz, the presence region, the all-important clarity area. It's all over the place. And so as you can, when it's really stark, you can compare it to the original. It's quite a dark presentation, lack of detail, lack of sparkle, but you're not going to really notice that because all you're going to hear is the boom, and there is a big, old, satisfying boom. So let's get on to the comparisons. First of all, I'm going to compare the massively Boombox heavy, I need a better catchphrase than that, Boombox 2 compared to the JBL extremely priced 3.
That I won't back down, I save me. Well, I've got them all praying now. New religions got them on the ground. Not a saint, but I'll help you get found. What they see, you cry for help so shamelessly. You'll never put the blame on me. When they see me screaming, do I make you nervous? Am I such a burden? You're always so certain you're right about me. Do I make you nervous? Did I really deserve this? Does that serve my purpose, but you're useless to me? Do I make you nervous? Did I make you nervous? Yeah, you try, but you can't put me down. Useless to me. When they see me screaming, do I make you nervous? Am I such a burden? You're always so certain you're right about me. Do I make you nervous? Did I really deserve this? Does that serve my purpose, but you're useless to me? Do I make you nervous? Do I make you nervous? Useless to me. Do I make you nervous? Do I make you nervous?
Boombox 2, 600 Hz and down, way more bass heavy than the JBL Xtreme 3. We also see the problems on my Boombox 2. Dips 1.3 kilohertz, 2.5 kilohertz, 5.5 kilohertz. We're into the brilliance region before it starts smoothing out. But it's all about deep bass. overall deep bass 2 dB up on the Boombox 2, but by 40 hertz, an amazing 18 decibels more in the deep bass on the Boombox 2.
It does what it says on the box. It goes boom, 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 and it goes deeply boom, 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 and it's a bass that you can feel, not just hear. It's a big old bass. It's a lot of fun. Actually, it's not even as overblown as I was expecting. I can use this indoors. I was not expecting that. Yes, it's massively bass heavy. Yes, it's going to annoy my neighbours, but it's not a complete assault on my eardrums as I was expecting, just to hear bass. So yeah, lack of details, lack of mids. You, especially when you hear it against the JBL Xtreme 3. However, I find the JBL Xtreme 3, it's my favourite of all the Xtreme speakers, but still has a very electronic nature because of where the high peaks are on that. But hey, a speaker we talk about, well, it's got a deep old bass, is that as deep as the Xtreme 3? We talk about it being deep. Sounds anemic, sounds thin against the JBL Boombox 2. That's how bass heavy and how deep the JBL Boombox does go. 18 decibels stronger. 18 decibels at 50 hertz. I mean, they're still playing at 50 hertz. The start where we would call sub bass. I mean, that is massive. The difference is big. But of course, you want to know, and I wanted to know, and you probably already know because other people have been doing it, as you know. But here's my take on the JBL Boombox 2 versus a single motion boom.
Some bad wishes from people that don't really understand the feeling that we have. There's gonna be some bad wishes from people that don't really understand it's that we have. Oh baby, keep loving, keep loving me just like you do it, like you do it, like you hiss don't lift, so we keep growing just like we do it, like you do it. Like you.
Single motion boom against the Boombox 2, and as you can see, massive, huge, amazingly more bass in the deep bass on the Boombox 2, rolling off from 70 hertz on the motion boom, rolling off from 45 hertz approximately on the Boombox 2. At 40 hertz, 20 decibels up is the Boombox 2.
We talk about, oh wow, the Soundcore Motion Boom. You can play down to 40 hertz. Wow, deep bass, lovely deep bass, lovely warm bass. Here against the Boombox 2, it's 20 decibels down on the Boombox 2 at 40 hertz. I mean, that's not just a bit louder. That is another planet. So it puts the Soundcore Motion Boom in perspective when we talk about it being a bass-heavy speaker. That's a bass-heavy speaker. Obviously, you can go deeper and deeper and louder in bass as we get bigger and bigger, and that's bigger and bigger and bigger. That's 80 quid. That's about 450 quid or $500. There's a big difference. But just to say, if you buy this speaker because you want deep bass, you will get a lot more deep bass out the Boombox 2. But what you won't get is the clarity and a bit more balance from the motion boom. That's a single motion boom. What happens if we have two motion booms against the JBL Boombox 2?
Yes!
field, but all I could see was you. You're magnetic, captivating, and you know it's true. Sent a smile and you started to make your way through the crowd. It grew so loud, you and I didn't even care. I've loved you since I met you. Did I ever tell you that? Let's try to push you out, you pull in. I fell hard so fast. I've loved you since I met you. Did I ever tell you that? Let's try to push you out, you pull in. I fell hard so fast.
Boombox 2 versus a pair of motion booms. The gap does narrow. Two motion booms actually dominates the upper bass and the mid bass. It's the deep bass where the Boombox 2 does its thing. At 40 Hz, it's 14 decibels up. But overall bass, it's only a couple of decibels up on a pair of motion booms.
Do you know what? Two motion booms can hold their own, in my opinion, against the Boombox 2. Now, you won't get the deep bass that you will get from the Boombox 2 at the all-important 40 Hz, some 14 decibels down, which is still huge, but a lot less than the single. So the big benefits to getting the second motion boom, but it can hold its own in mid bass. It can hold its own in upper bass. It's just that deep bass, and obviously below 50 Hz where it simply can't compete. But you're going to get clarity. You're going to get imaging that you won't get from the Boombox 2. As I've already said, I don't know if it's the same for all boomboxes. I can only go by my version of the Boombox 2. It does have issues in the presence region, well, all along upper mids and up to the harmonics, really, into the highs. It's all over the place. It's wavy. Resonance, as they would tell you, is that crossover related, but there's many bumps. So I don't know if that's just my specific version. But do you know what? For 160 quid, you can get something approaching the fun factor of the Boombox 2. It's not, but it just can't compete in the very deepest of bass. So, well, that's around, what was that? Around 70% for both of them. So two of those will play about the same on the volume scale, 70%, 70%. You don't buy the Boombox 2 to play it next to the cat, do you? You buy it because you want your neighbours evicted. You want them to move out. You want them to move out in a hurry. That's why you get the Boombox 2. So how loud does it actually go? Is that the reason why we're going to be asked to pay $500 opposed to about $160? How loud do they go?
Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. That's right. I'll be the predator, I'll hunt the prey, then we can make love every night, every day. It's a jungle out there and life still ain't easy, but we can make like the animals on TV. Cause you and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. You and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, so let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel.
So, maximum volume, two motion booms, they are the loudest. The loudest by quite some way. And they completely dominate over not just the Boombox 2, but of course the JBL Xtreme 3 as well, in the orange there. And it's notable, again, the Boombox 2 with its dips, 1 kHz, 2.5 kHz, most recessed of all the speakers here. It's that bass where it does retain its bass, is doing it at the expense of upper bass, lower mids, and the mids dominant two motion booms will sound a bit shrieky, but at the end of the day, overall bass, two motion booms, about the same as the Boombox 2. It's the deep bass, where the Boombox 2 is 6 dB up still, over two motion booms, near 10 decibels up on the Xtreme 3 in that deep bass, and around 11 dB up on a single motion boom.
Woohoo! They go louder. Two motion booms in the UK, I'd pay 160 quid or 450. What are you going to do? 160 quid, 450 quid. These go louder. Yes, I know it's going to be a bit more screechy because the bass isn't there. And it's all about the deep bass. So obviously, they're trying to keep hold of the deep bass. That costs a lot in terms of the power. But on paper, 160 watts. On paper, 30 watts each for a total of 60 watts. But here's the thing. You put an extra one in, it's not just doubling the power, you're doubling the surface area. So actually, in equivalent, if it was a single speaker, when you have two, the equivalent would be 120 watts. But still, 120 watts versus... Actually, I think it was 120 watts on battery. Yeah, so there you go. Oh, just answering my own question. Actually, if you think of two of them in terms of how much power would you need from a single one, it would be 120 watts. And indeed, it goes louder because it's not driving the deep bass that you are getting. It has the fun factor, but not necessarily the loud factor or the clarity factor. But when you're just playing the Boombox 2, to be honest, I found it a lot of fun. Was usable indoors, because a lot will depend on how boomy and how big your room is. See, the smaller the room, the more build up in bass you're going to get, and it may just get really, really annoying. Where did that leave the JBL Xtreme 3? Lagging behind. So here's the thing. Obviously, I'm using the EQ. No EQ in the app for the Boombox 2, but you can push the bass. It's laughingly called a graphic equalizer. It's not. It's an algorithm balancer, the three bands that you get. And if you push bass just +1, obviously it's even worse if you do a +2, but +1 means it's going to limit bass earlier, about 70%, and then to make it sound a little bit more bass heavy as you go up the volume scale, it's going to give you less mids and highs. So that's why this result against the Xtreme 3 and a single motion boom is different, with the motion boom now going louder, because they're deliberately giving you less of the mids and highs to balance the bass, because you said you wanted a bit more bass, +1. And so they're fooling you to think it's a bit more bass heavy. That's why it's not so loud. Something to note, when you're messing around with the slider, and if you want a speaker that goes the loudest, you won't be able to put it at +1. You'll lose loudness. So that leaves one question outstanding. What's that, Al? Well, it's got a mains lead. Woody saw it went about a decibel louder, around 65%. What about a maximum volume? How much difference does it make? Is it the difference between getting in a bath without water or getting in the bath and you've actually filled it up and it's lovely and relaxing?
Get your cards away for nothing. Time you told me you weren't bluffing. Guess I should have read the signs. It took so long to find. Oh, great, fantastic, you must turn it on. Why make you plastic without it so long? Over your antics, you showed me I'm wrong. I hope that you're happy now. Life is time, life is time. Take a look back, look what you did last night, what you did last night. Never listen, yeah, I know that you told me one day you'd show me.
So battery mode, mains mode, 100% volume, you're getting about a decibel more. It's not massively louder when you go to mains. And because that upper bass still limits, if you overlay them, actually the mains is slightly more recessed in that upper bass, lower mids.
So again, not night and day. It's the same result as earlier. It goes about a decibel louder. And you'd actually have to listen out for the... So it's not a major thing if to say, well, I can plug the lead in and go louder. I know people will say, well, I get more bass when I plug mine. It's not more bass, it's just going louder. You're going to perceive that as more bass. Do you know why? Because the louder it goes, the more sensitive you are to bass, which means it's just going to seem louder when it isn't. And that's the same reason why we have loudness compensation at low volumes, where you're not very sensitive and you'd have to have massively more bass for each volume step for it to sound just balanced between each volume step. Hope that makes sense to you. So that's pretty much a wrap. Just if you're interested in the specs, I know the Boombox 3 is coming out, but if you're still interested in the Boombox 2 or any of these speakers or any of the other specs, of course, probably the biggest one you're going to want to know about is, oh, let's have a look round the back. Oh, he's only opening up the back flap, and he's only going to show us what's inside, isn't it? Woo-hoo-hoo. We've got auxiliary. We've got auxiliary out. That's for loads of you, and especially people who DJ. I've completely underestimated how many of you actually want to use these speakers for that sort of thing. And lag on auxiliary is a big issue to you. We've also, of course, not got USB-C charging, but we've got the old barrel charger. And that's the point about the auxiliary input, which you have also on the JBL Xtreme 3 and the Boombox 2. And because I'm getting so many questions about the auxiliary, I'm going to start, again, testing lag on the auxiliary. I know we just assume you're going to get no lag, but that's not the case. A lot of processing in these speakers, and it's amazing how many times there's quite serious lag. However, for me personally, I got no lag at all when using auxiliary on the Xtreme 3. Raquel something, who does live DJing and needs more views if you can find her. Raquel, racking my brain. I'll probably put it up in the edit. Telling me that she gets quite bad lag when she DJs. But if she goes into what she calls what she calls low frequency mode, but we know as service mode or brick your speaker mode, that gets rid of the lag, and that's fine. I can only tell you on my speaker I'm getting no lag, but on the Boombox 2, I can say minus 17 milliseconds. What does that mean? It's actually a fraction earlier. So if you saw someone's lips moving, you actually get the sound a fraction earlier. That's almost imperceptible, but if a lag is absolutely crucial to you, just note there's about 17 milliseconds. In terms of normal Bluetooth lag, which I personally talk about 50 milliseconds as being excellent, about as good as you get, or 40 milliseconds. So 70, that's really, really good. Just know there is some lag on the Boombox 2, but I don't get it on my JBL Xtreme 3. Well, what else do you need to know? We need to know, of course, 249 quid, about $285 for the JBL Extremely priced 3, about 80 quid each for the booms. We would talk about the price on the Boombox 2, you know that. We talked about the battery, and here's the thing. Forget milliamps, you're going to get confused. I will tell you the actual capacity of these batteries, 72.6 watt hours versus 37 watt hours versus 36.3 watt hours. That's all you need to know. They're all SBC. Yep, 500 quid, $500 you get SBC. All Bluetooth 5 versions. JBLs are both party boost, so they will all connect to each other. Remember, you've got to have party boost compatible speakers to connect to each other. If one of them is party boost, it's USB-C charging on the Boom and the Xtreme 3. Can use all of them as a power bank. Can only use the Motion Boom as a phone speaker. Rated 100 watts AC, but RMS for the JBL Xtreme 3, which is again why it can't be 60 watts on the Boombox 1. I just think they forgot to rate the tweeters. We already talked about the other powers. We talked about charging. Obviously, it's only 5 volts, 2 amps, whereas we can get 100 watts of charging. That's 10 watts, 100 watts, and 60 watts of charging. Nearly 6 kilos, 1.5 kilos, 2 kilos. They all float. That surprised me. I thought I was going to lose this in the bottom of me bath, but I didn't. Do you know what? It floated on the top. That was a shocker. But unfortunately, with the driver's side down. But they are all IPX7 rated. This is a weird one. JBL, they only rate this at 50 hertz to 20 kilohertz. But the Xtreme 3, 53.5 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz. I don't know how they come up with these figures. Obviously, they're completely meaningless. They don't give us a plus or minus anything. So meaningless. So we talked about already woofer, tweeter, woofer, tweeter, and of course passive radiators on the side of all of them, but no tweeter. But what we got? Titanium drivers. Titanium drivers on the Motion Boom, but no tweeters. None of them any good for streaming. Testing on YouTube, I got 116 milliseconds on the Xtreme 3. I got 117 milliseconds for the Boom, for the Motion Boom, and 140 milliseconds. Anything above 80 milliseconds, in my personal opinion, is of no use at all. So, got an app you can set, laughingly called EQ. It's an algorithm mess about thing. In reality, it's not a graphic equalizer. No equalizer at all, anyway, for the Boombox 2. And we've got a fantastic, class-leading graphic equalizer. multi-band graphic equalizer in the Motion Boom, which completely transforms the use of the speaker. I never really settle on any EQ because no tweeters, and it is limited what these drivers can do. Some speakers you can still EQ. We talk about some speakers are more EQable than others, and it really is the case. So I don't find this particularly, you can certainly improve the sound, certainly to your own taste with the EQ. Just know it's whatever you try to set, there's going to be a trade-off. It's all about the bass on this speaker, so I favor the bass. But if I try and grab more clarity, it's a harsh sort of clarity, it doesn't quite work. You can't, remember, it's trying to drive bass, and that's why do we have multi-driver speakers? Because it's doing a lot of different, the excursion is different depending on if you want the highs or the lows and the mids, which is why they split them up. It makes them more efficient, more pleasing on the ear. And if you're an audiophile, yeah, that's all you're gonna be wanting. One driver trying to do multiple frequencies doesn't really work on the Motion Boom. Some speakers are more equalizer friendly than others. That's my wrap. That was the first. I said I would never do speakers this size, and do you know what? Actually went better than I expected because I can actually use this indoors. To me, it wasn't as overpowering. Yes, the difference in the bass on the Boombox 2 is you feel it. I talked about that with the Onyx Studio series. It's bass you feel. Whereas we say, oh, that's nice. I can hear lovely bass. I can feel lovely bass. Feel bass, hear bass. And we know. So the problem for me with the JBL Xtreme 3, I don't really like how it's equalized in the highs, so it comes off harsh. But as I said, it is for me my favorite of the Xtreme speakers. But I just find with the right tuning, I do prefer the sound of the Motion Boom. I know you will say, well, it's all a bit woolly in the bass, and I just find it more pleasing on the eardrums. Well, that's a wrap. That's my conclusion. My conclusion is, none of the other speakers, none of them, and especially the small speaker, you can't make up for the deep bass you get on Boombox 2. It's there, it's nice. Can use it indoors, depending on obviously your hearing threshold is. Doesn't go as loud as you might expect. 2 boomboxes will go notably, not a bit louder, notably louder. Would explain why that is, because in equivalent terms, one of those speakers, and is 120. When you have 2, it's equivalent of having one at 120 watts. When that don't work, 30 times 30, as I said, 30 plus 30, because you've doubled up the power, but you've doubled the surface area. So again, that would be the same as doubling the power. So we normally hope for about 6 decibels more when we had a second speaker. I don't know how many times I've already said that's a wrap. How long am I in now? I will pass it off there. Let's see what it is in the edit. It's not a speaker I could have as my only speaker because the clarity is missing, the sparkle is missing. But if I want a lot of fun, if I want to evict my neighbours, I'm going to pick this up. I'll probably pick it up more than I was expecting to. I did enjoy listening. I have enjoyed listening to it. I thought the bass it does keep on the right side of too much bass. Audiophiles of the world are looking away in horror.
Hello, Alan. Self-declared audiophile here. You must be crazy.
Yes, it's not an audiophile speaker because it's not £40,000. But hey, I like this more than I expected. Not ever going to be my only speaker because it is all about the bass, but it's a lot of fun. I thank you for watching, and maybe you'll watch me again.
I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Ain't no project wife, got my logic right, cause I'm not your type. I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Sorry, ma, I ain't get it right. I'ma just live my life. I ain't about that. I ain't about that life.